Hi everyone, I'm Ada, but more importantly, I have three fantastic panelists with us today. So we have Mark, otherwise known as VoxelBlaze, who's head of Sandbox ANZ and also the founder of Blaze Games. We have Aaron, who's the founder of Futureverse, Centrality AI, oh man, Alter State Machine. I can go on, but I'll let him tell his own story because he'll tell it best. Ooh. For someone in tech, I'm very bad with tech. And finally, I have Matty, otherwise known as DCL Blogger, who is... Woo! So Matty's the founder of Metakey, is a hugely loved educator in the Web3 space, and also an investor. So, and me, I'm an investor at AirTree Ventures. We invest in early stage startups, have a crypto fund, and invested in companies like Immutable, Alter State Machine, and I won't go on. But first, I might just kick it off with some intro. So I'd love to hear from each of you, your first ever normie job, what initially drew you into Web3, what you've worked on, and then what you're working on right now. So I'll start with you, Matty.
All right, awesome. Hey guys, what's going on? Good to see Melbourne out here. It's pretty awesome. Yeah, very cool. When I got into crypto and NFTs in 2017-18, I was like, well, who else is doing NFTs? There's not a single person in Australia that I think is doing NFTs. And it's just awesome to see this much interest in the space. Anyway, normie job. I mean, I don't know how far we want to rewind it back, but career-wise, I actually did engineering at uni, did civil engineering at Monash actually for about 4 years, and worked 2 years in the industry. Very quickly found out that I was a really bad employee. I'd just get everything wrong, like my spreadsheets, and I'd just make so many mistakes. And I was like, I just don't want to work in a space, right? So quit. I was actually going to start a Crazy John's franchise. Crazy John's ended up getting one branded. Vodafone ended up acquiring Crazy John's, and that didn't happen. So I think 2 years into my professional career, after 2 years in civil engineering, I basically had some money in the bank and was exploring business and marketing for the next 6 years. So I did 6 years in marketing, then fell into crypto and NFTs, and then, yeah, 5 years into that space, and now we're here.
Kick over to you, Aaron.
Yeah, so I guess I started in engineering as well, in telecommunications, if you could call engineering digging ditches and laying cables. But kind of moved through into more technical roles, and then product, and out of product into the business management side, and then corporate ventures. I got out now more than 10 years ago. Started doing some startup stuff and came across Bitcoin around 2015. Had some friends who had come to visit me from Switzerland in 2016, and I was having a good chat to one of them who's a lawyer by the name of Luca Muller, with a firm called MME up in Switzerland, and we were having this really robust conversation about smart contracts, which was the thing I was super interested in. And I was like, you know an awful lot about this obscure technology at the time for a lawyer, and it turns out he was one of the original lawyers who came up with the structure of the Ethereum Foundation and a bunch of the early crypto projects. So I kind of took that as a sign from the gods that this thing that I was kind of interested in should be something I spend a bit more time on, and in 2016 got in full-time, started a venture studio. Now got over 60 portfolio companies in Web3, and really focused now on getting that next stage of user adoption, and that's kind of where we're spending our time in the Futureverse now.
Yeah, so I'm Mark. I'm also known as VoxelBlaze on Twitter. Mine is a bit different to everyone else here. I was originally in hospitality management. I just worked in bars, and then COVID kicked around, and I couldn't work in bars anymore. So I had to find something else, and I was always interested in crypto, even since 2017, and I heard NFTs had come around the same time COVID had hit, and I just did a bit more research. I found the Sandbox, and I invested about 10K into that, decided to become an artist and just kind of learn how to do that. Found out I had some talent and kind of just ran with that, made a gaming company with my friends. We won a game jam, got the funds to kind of start up, and then we became the Australian and New Zealand reps for them from there. What we've been working on now is just basically bringing on IPs for the Sandbox and trying to create the Australiaverse.
I think what really stands out is that you can come from different paths in life. Some from digging ditches, some from serving drinks and having a good bevy, and you can come into this space and find a place that's really resonates with you and go really deep in it. I think we should set the foundations for what is the metaverse before we dive into these various ditches. I've got a nice little quote to kick us off from Kraken, which is, "The building blocks of a crypto metaverse, namely the ownership economy, decentralized networks, NFTs and currencies, come together to bring users a more compelling value proposition through greater accessibility, full control of their experience, and opportunities to chase financial incentives." I think I'd love to know, what is the metaverse to you, and then what future are you building towards?
I'll go again? Okay. That sums it up really, really well. To me, I think the metaverse is sort of like this ongoing transition to a more digitally immersive experience. And visually, that's been there before. I mean, we played RuneScape, we've watched movies on this, World of Warcraft, and all of these places, VR chat. And there's visually, a lot of advancements have been made. But when you see the metaverse, or you sort of envision it, there's all this structural stuff that needs to be built, and that's where blockchain and NFTs and all these asset transfer databases come into play. And I think that's what's super interesting. That's the sort of these fringe technologies being built, and this perfect storm sort of around the corner. When it happens, it'll kind of build this sort of metaverse that we all have envisioned. So I sort of see myself, at the very least, trying to keep up with this transition as best as I can, and play a part somehow, whether it means build an NFT project that builds connective tissue between other layers of the metaverse, or whether it brings some IPs here and allows them to understand what the Web3 community wants, and just trying to be part of it, to be honest. So yeah, that's my definition of the metaverse. I think it's very difficult personally to put a definition on it. I kind of think it's kind of like defining the internet or the World Wide Web in the year 2000. We never knew how much of an enabler it would be. But yeah.
Yeah, I think I could build on that general concept a little bit more, in saying that it definitely is just the internet. It's like the next version of the internet, with a couple of things that are a bit distinctive, I think, from what we've seen in the past. And one of those things is ownership. I think you could call anything that exists that people say is a metaverse that doesn't have ownership as just using that buzzword to rebrand the game they were trying to build or market, because that's really what they are. If you take ownership out of the equation, it's just something we've had for the last 20, 30 years. All of the things you hear about VR and AR and this world and that world, they're just applications that have existed before. The new thing that makes the metaverse special is this ownership, this notion of personal ownership of digital things. So that's, I think, an important tenet. It's the internet plus personal ownership. I think the other thing is that it's kind of already here, because what the metaverse is about is concatenating silos that were things that you did on their own into a more streamlined user experience. And people kind of jump towards immersive as being something that involves a virtual reality experience or something like that. But actually, it's about removing the friction between things that existed before in a digital world. A good example of what I'd say is something that we've seen as a transition in this move to the metaverse is, back in the day, we would have had communications, media, finance, gaming, commerce, all as distinct things you would do. You'd go from one thing to another to interact with those things. And even further back, communications and media had their own networks. That's how separate they were. And then we saw the emergence of social media, which actually squished communications and media together into a single user experience. And on top of that, we've started to see commerce come into that with social commerce. And you can see the early days of finance coming into play in that space with buy now, pay later. All of these things are concatenating the user experience. You don't go somewhere else to do that. It's all in the one place inside that singular UX. And that's really what the metaverse is. I think the third thing, which is related to the first, is that the metaverse is primarily the data layer. everyone jumps to the application in their mind because they've seen Ready Player One, and that's like, oh, that's cool, that's the metaverse. But actually, it's about that portability of my identity, my social graph, my communications, the metadata about me and the things I've done, the assets I hold, and making those available to any application. So if I summed all of that up, it's the next generation of the internet, which is powered by true ownership of those underlying data assets, and it's the collection of interoperable applications that interact with that data that makes the metaverse.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with both my panelists. They've both covered it very well. The metaverse is just the evolution of the internet, bringing creators and consumers together, having an economy with a currency on there so we can all work together. It's basically just making what we have now with Twitter and Facebook and all those other things, everyone's using everything each day, but just more connected, more peer-to-peer, less middlemen, and you can actually just interact with everyone in a very simple way.
Thank you so much. I guess a great summary of that is we're moving towards like a mullet life, right? Where we basically see the Web 2, what we're familiar with, but the engine that sits behind it is something that maybe we're not familiar with yet, but it'll get normalized very quickly. Let's dive a little bit into community, because I feel like, you know, if we think about Web3 and especially in the NFT space, there's been a very community-led movement around how projects have arisen, and now we're slowly transitioning into this piece around building, which we'll touch on as well a little bit later. I'd love to start with you, Mark and Matty. Like, what have you seen has driven really the success of the community so far, and like, what do you think needs to be done in the best way possible now going forward to drive future successes? And you can talk about your own projects, you can talk about projects you've been involved in, whatever you like.
I think one of the biggest things at the moment is UGC, user-generated content, basically just because you need to be able to make your own content, you need to be able to put it out there, you need to be able to share it with people. And if you can't do that, it's not really a metaverse, it's kind of coming back to you have to go through a company, like to do something else, you have to go through someone else to actually connect. Community focus is like basically the forefront of Web3. That's what we all want. We want to work together to be able to benefit from each other and also take away all these, I guess, middlemen that kind of leech off the system that we have at the moment. They pull value out of what we have where it could just be much more streamlined with the metaverse that we have, and with community focused, we can basically push away the bad actors, which is one of the things that we haven't been able to do at the moment in the current industry, I think. In the Sandbox, it's one of those things that they're really forefront with UGC. They always want to go front. They want to support the user. They want to make sure that you have all the tools at your disposal to be able to get involved and create and just be a part of the community.
And dive into that a little bit more. Like, before Sandbox moved into this place where they're building and bring, you know, these like gaming competitions and bring people to build, how did they build that initial community? Like, what do you think it was that really drew them in? Like, what drew you in?
It was for me personally, it was the value that they had. Basically, compared to anyone in the market at the time when I was getting into NFTs, there was a few other projects I could probably just mention. There was one called Crypto Voxels, and I think they were charging 10 times the amount for 1/10 the space to actually build on. And in the Sandbox, it was just that value. They weren't trying to, I guess, pull value out of the system too much. They wanted to actually make this grow. They knew that they needed to be able to bring people on and provide them with jobs and places to go and fun experiences to play to make this work. And the only way to get people to come in is to offer these services, like be able to have these tools, like Vox Edit for Sandbox or Game Maker, where you can make your own game world and interest other people in what you're making, and that's how you kind of gain an audience, and then other people get interested in what you're doing, and then you kind of form this community around what you're doing, and then they get brought into the Sandbox and they talk about it more to their friends, and they make their own community, and it has this kind of cascading effect, basically. This one person tells this next person, this one person tells the next person. As long as it's got this, I like to say, genuine thought to it, and you're not trying to like rip anyone off, and it kind of comes across that really easily with UGC and the Sandbox in particular. It just kind of happens naturally.
Like, authenticity really translates through the screens. How about you, Matty?
No, super interesting. I remember Sandbox in the early days doing their pre-sales, and they were selling land for about $50 a piece. And selling virtual land is an interesting thing because they can sell it for $50 a piece, but eventually, because the supply gets capped and there's no more left on the primary market, you're buying it off the secondary market and suddenly lands like $1,000, $3,000, sometimes $10,000, and then it sort of blocks creators getting in. So the whole virtual land economy is an interesting thing to really get into. Community is an interesting word, I believe, in the Web3 space because, I mean, crypto prices are down, and if you ask yourself how much of the community has left, it's like 95% of the people that were here 6 months ago aren't really here, right? So I think at the early start of a project, you're really on a mission to find like-minded people. I think you're looking at the whole space, you're trying to find, all right, if you're making an AI project or you're making a project that's specific to Metaverse explorers, you want to try and find your first 100 core users that believe in what you believe in and that can contribute with their ideas and their talent and their time, and they're sort of as obsessed as you are, right? Because as a project, even as someone that's been here for 4 to 5 years, I'm still learning about the tools that exist today and how to put them together to build business models or provide value to people. So yeah, community hunting, trying to find the right people, trying to deliver value to those people. And Web3 is an interesting space as well because you can sell assets and bootstrap funding for your company on day one before you really built any momentum to your final product. So that's also a challenge. You've sort of initially gathered a community of 10,000 Discord members, but inevitably they've got to wait 6 to 8 months for you to put something out of value, right? So it's an interesting one. I think what is successful are those that communicate regularly and are very transparent with their actionable, with their momentum. And any challenges in the crypto space, if there's a hack, if there's a question on your funding, you're sort of transparent, you sort of quell any issues very quickly, you're open, you're consistent on Discord, and I'll admit it's very hard to do. I haven't been consistent on Discord, right? You're sort of trying to build a product, but you're also trying to be there on Discord, you're trying to do announcements, but you're also still building product. You have to zone in and out, you have to be active on social media, you have to do YouTube and podcasts and Twitter. It's a huge deal, honestly, when it comes to Web3 and community management. You're also trying to bring in new people, but manage the current ones. Honestly, I can talk about it for about an hour, but it's a challenge, and I think those that get it right are just open and transparent and regular with their forms of communication.
Nice one. I think it's worth calling out as well that you've been building your community since pre these cycles of hypes, pre NFT summer, and that these learnings have carried you, if it's fair to say, carried you through these various cycles.
Yeah, I remember in the early days of Decentraland. There was, they were building for 2 years and there was no product to even check out for the first 2 years of when first buying that land. And so it was like, all right, well, what do you do during those 2 years? You talk to each other, you talk about what can be done, but after a while you get bored, right? So you start to speculate on whether the team's even doing anything. And then, you start to see, for me, it was interesting to see that happen. And then when Decentraland did launch and then you could go in and check it out, well, then there was a lot of momentum work to be done. So, all right, let's run some conferences. Let's try and break the platform and see what bugs and stuff need to be tested and fixed. And so through that process, I knew the faces out there that were the regular users, that were the regular builders, the regular conference attendees that would pitch in. Even though the markets were down, these guys were still regular. So I knew there was some sort of base there for a project that was Metaverse interested. And obviously with the Sandbox and Crypto Voxel, there was heavy momentum in people interested to build this Metaverse thing, even before Meta even rebranded, and there was this buzz around the Metaverse. So yeah, 4 years of learning and sticking around and seeing everything, you start to see faces and you start to gauge interest levels at what sort of projects you can launch and run.
For sure. Zooming out a little bit now, Aaron, could you talk to us? I'd love to get your thoughts on, now that we've built these communities, how do we then drive towards mass adoption? How do we make these projects stick with a wider audience and get more people in?
Yeah, just to reinforce on community, I think the number one most important thing for Web3 is community, because what it's trying to do is to hand power back to communities. Even if you look at the base layers of infrastructure, what is blockchains? Blockchains are community operated clouds. And so that's the infrastructure in which we build the next version of the internet on top of. And so everything has to be about community. And you said, like you said, finding like-minded people who want to go on that mission with you and really believe in what you're trying to do and being authentic with them is a super important thing to do when you want to start in this space, because that's what the whole thing is about. If you're not doing that, then you kind of miss the point almost. Now, hard thing is how do you scale that? scaling communities is super hard. And the way that we've been looking at it is not a new thing, but really looking into user segments and kind of looking across your audience as it grows. What are the different archetypes of people who are going to be in your community, from those that are hardcore, committed members, the builders who are going to build alongside you, the super fans who love the content. Is it the casual people who are there for a particular slice of the experience, and that's what they care about. So get really good and really clear about user segmentation, and then build programs around those user segments is the most important thing for scaling. Before we get there, we have to have a whole bunch of things to fix in terms of the user experience, because right now, if we're being honest with each other, the metaverse and the Web3 metaverse is actually a meme. Like, the whole notion of what we think the metaverse is, with all this kind of interoperable experiences and stuff like that, doesn't exist. Even within the bigger properties within Web3, you don't have clear interoperability across projects and stuff like that. So there's some fundamental building blocks that need to be in place before those things can happen, and really boring stuff like ontologies for data standards and stuff like that. So when I have an object, an application can tell what that object is, and then when it goes to a new game, it can be, this is a chair, you can sit on chairs, and those just simple dumb things like that. So got to start from the basics a little bit and kind of build up these layers of technology, really focus on user experience so that it feels like magic. And no product will ever find a market if it doesn't do something magical that you couldn't do before. You think about every great product that's ever been launched, even if it did 90% of things really crappy, if it did this one thing that was magic, that's what makes people's imagination spark and makes them start to get on board and wants to drive that adoption forward. And we haven't shown that yet in Web3, and certainly not in the Web3 metaverse. And so we need to show people what's that magic product experience that they can do now that they couldn't do before. And the secret sauce in that is ownership. So if we can break down the barriers to adoption by making the technology simple and showing them a magic product experience, then we've got the grounds to get people starting to come in. And once they start to come in, we can build the segments around them. Once they're in those segments, you can kind of target how you deal with growing each one of those segments from a communications or collaborations point of view.
For sure. Really brings to mind, when we think about interoperability, Pokemon, for instance, when we were kids, right? That ability to even share that one path, of like sharing the Pokemon that you have with a friend, that's a connecting experience. And it's a connecting experience driven by ownership.
Yeah.
And the ability to interact and socialize. And I think that comes to the core of gaming as well, where gaming is a social experience. It's a way to connect, whether with each other, through dueling, battling your worst enemy online, in a harmless way.
And just actually build good shit. I think one of the things that's been really disappointing, I guess, but maybe expected, was that the Web3 community, when they started to get into this content application layer, went super focused on the economics of these applications as opposed to the fun of them. And I think, as an industry, we need to step back and make things that are fun for people to engage with, that are high quality, and the economics will come. That's a given. If you make good shit and people want to use your product, there's economics to be had there. But don't rush to the end game. Make good stuff that is fun to engage with and gives you something different to do, and then people will come. And then there's an economy that can be built around the user ownership inside of that. And we've been quite deliberate not to rush, out with staking games and all those kinds of things, because that puts the focus off making something that's enjoyable fun, and it puts barriers in the way for new adopters to come in and try and understand this new world. So take a little bit more time, build higher quality things, make them fun, make the user experience magic, give people something they couldn't do before, and then we win.
Sure. And it's hard. You go, Matty.
I was saying that's just that simple. No, it's interesting because the Web3 community is very, like, you start to dive into the whole thing, like, are users, is this layer of users, this first wave of users actually your co-investors, right? The 10,000 people that came in that bought your NFT, because are they your first wave of investors? Are they what will help you scale to proper users that don't really part with money to be part of your applications? Like with Uniswap, I use Uniswap, but I don't have to buy the Uni token, right? So it's always, I think, like zooming out and trying to really understand this space as it is interesting, and it should be done. I can keep going on, but next question.
That's that user segmentation at play, right? So you're creating value for the segment who's interested in the economic game, but you're not playing that game. You're just using the product. And if you can design systems that allow the people who want to play the economic game to play their game, and that the value and true cash flows are driven by the users who just want to use the experience, then you've got the perfect mix. And that takes a little bit longer to do, because in order to make something that isn't just a Ponzi, you're going to have to get real cash flows going through it. And to do that, you're going to have users who want to consume it just because it's good, not because they're playing the game, the economic game. If everyone's playing the economic game, it'll collapse. It doesn't work. And so get the segments right. Let the people who want to play their role in those different layers play their role, but make sure that it's focused on good product at the soul of it.
Sure.
I'll jump in real quick again.
Yeah, go
But I also noticed, like, we're sort of building product backwards. So it's kind of like we're putting out the economy layer first, and then we're trying to build something fun after that's out there. It's really difficult to do. Super difficult to do, naturally. Yeah, almost impossible, honestly, because you actually have a niche community that's actually leaving you every day because they're waiting for a product. And then you're trying to find something fun for that niche community. By the time you find it, they're probably gone. Right? That's the reality of a lot of projects. But traditionally, with projects and games, they build something fun. Suddenly, there's 10,000, 100,000 users that are playing this game that absolutely love it. And then you try and monetize it here and there that's not too disruptive to the experience. But with NFT projects, and I think anything built on blockchain with tokens, you're sort of like putting an economy out there, whether you want to or not, and then you're trying to create some fun later on. Hard to do, honestly, from the 2017 projects, the batch of projects, there's like a handful that lasted this long.
Sure. If we look last year, right, like people were building like these huge roadmaps that, you know, and I'll throw to you as well in a bit, Mark, like these things take time. Like Sandbox has been in production for many, many years, right? It takes money, it takes time, it takes big teams and also experience. And it's not something you can throw into a JPEG and chuck it into the ethosphere and go, hey, you should put money into this.
Yeah, exactly. So the Sandbox is kind of going into the direction of what these guys said. You need to have alternate revenue streams. You need to have the UGC, someone who's interested, like a consumer that's interested in a content creator's content because he just wants to buy it and play it because it's really fun and sick. He makes really cool avatars. He makes really cool weapons. I want to go play that guy's games because he's made a really cool game. But also, he said as well, if everything's on financial, basically everything fails because everyone's playing the game of I'm going to make one up on you, you're going to make one up on me, and then everyone makes one up on the other person, and the first person that sells kills everyone. And that's kind of how you fall down. So the Sandbox is kind of built into that system where you need to have fun stuff, and you need to have these alpha experiences. You need to show people and educate people about Web3 before they will turn from just a player to actually an investor.
Yeah, we have this, this kind of concept which it aligns to that, which we're calling play and learn, which I think is much more important than play and earn, because if people genuinely learn about the power of Web3 and personal ownership of stuff on the internet, the kind of participation, the economics of that will just become natural. They won't want to do anything else because that becomes their belief system. And so gaming and the metaverse can be a powerful tool for helping people to onboard in a way that's really low friction and fun. You know, we've partnered with FIFA to launch one of their first games outside of the EA relationship, an AI-powered football game. We've got tens of thousands of people signing up who don't even know that they've signed up for a blockchain account and that they're playing a Web3 game. They're being on board in this because it's a fun product experience to be a part of. And then you can start to drip feed people, hey, did you know you could do this now? You know, this cool thing you could do that you couldn't do before. Did you know this how ownership works? Do you know this how you can take more control? And so education becomes a bedrock as well for expanding communities and growing the space and growing the open metaverse.
100%. shifting gears a little bit, and I think we've already touched on this a fair bit, interoperability and infrastructure. Like, how do we build this space? Like, what? Big question, but maybe we'll throw to you, Matty, for a bit, because you've been working on this interoperability and community and blending that together. Like, we'd love to kind of hear a bit about it.
Yeah, look, I'm a bit of a dreamer, I'll be honest. Technically, I don't know if it's possible or not. Many people, and I'm sure people in this room can look at some of the things that we're trying and be like, look, Matty, technically that's not possible yet, or maybe in the near future, right? But really look into, for me, blockchain is one big family, in a way. Everything built on blockchain is an application that you can tap into and build some sort of connective tissue with. And that's the difference between this space. Now, whether we're all playing nicely with each other, that's a different story. Of course, you've got competition and all sorts of things. That's the reality of it. But I don't see why we can't partner up with the game and be like, you know what, can we bring the Metakey to have some use in your project, and you guys can, maybe we can take an avatar and have it usable in our project, and maybe we can get the gears rolling. There's absolutely so much connective tissue that needs to be done in between, like auto-generated content and being able to make an avatar that can be rigged across multiple platforms in a seamless manner that takes a lot of time, energy, and resources. Very difficult to do. The whole dream of bringing all these avatars into one game is actually very difficult to do. But I think at least we can get the engines rolling, and maybe AI, in the next iteration of AI, can help make those processes quicker. So for us with the Metakey, it's really just, we've been around for about 1.5 years. We just want to say, you know what, like maybe 2 years down the track, there's 100 things you can do with the Metakey in 100 different apps and services in one way or the other. Maybe we don't even cross NFTs, but maybe we make that project story part of ours. Maybe it's part of the lore or something. But I think it's just an interesting concept to push forward because, again, blockchain to me is one big open spreadsheet that everyone can see and build upon. So that's how we're thinking about it.
100%. And Aaron, like, you've been tackling this since, what, 2016? And
Yeah.
like, how have you been approaching it back then? And then, you know, in this new environment where things are now, how are you then thinking about positioning yourself and the projects to create that metaverse in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like I mentioned earlier, the kind of meme of interoperability is a solid one, but in practical terms, it's actually a lot harder. And what it's come down to, I think, is there isn't this. There's two things happening. You know, back in the day when I was in telecommunications, we went through standards wars. And we're kind of in that space or that space now with the metaverse, where there aren't kind of strong, ratified, globally accepted standards for these things. So until that happens, it'll be slow to get interoperability at scale. There are lots of people doing some good work on that. I know the Sandbox team is behind some really cool standards initiatives. So we've got that bit that hasn't existed. And then I think the second thing is the data layer. And a lot of people point to NFTs as being kind of a solution to that, but actually it's probably creating more problems than it's solving. The token standards are good for interoperability on the ledger. So ERC 721 or whatever is a really good token standard for tokens on the ledger and the things that you need to do on the ledger, like, you know, transfer it from one person to another or have it interact with a smart contract from that point of view. But when you get a step beyond that into the actual content that sits behind these things, it's a mess, absolute mess. If anyone's tried to build a marketplace or even a website UX that interacts with other people's NFTs, you'll know what I'm talking about. You know, can't imagine the number of scrapers that are sitting behind OpenSea continuously trying to find the data. And I think something ridiculous like 30% of NFTs, OpenSea is the case of last resort. So the problem has been exasperated because there's been no defined standard that sits for the data that goes on the content side of an NFT. What we've been doing is trying to build something that goes outside of the blockchain to solve that problem, but is still decentralized and community driven. So we've been extending the W3C decentralized digital identity protocol to work for avatars and content, so that you can have NFTs anchored on any kind of network, using whatever standard that network uses at the ledger side of things, but they can all operate with this metadata layer that exists over the top of it. I think that's probably a good step forward, because if we can have a common way of referencing a data with a standard that already exists, you know, the W3C spec is pretty well ratified now, then we can have a chance at solving for the ability for applications to access that content and have that interoperability that everyone's, imagining when they watch Ready Player One.
I just have to say I agree, basically. Until we have that big conversation with everyone where we kind of come to the table and make some industry standards on what works together, there's not really going to be that much interoperability. There's only the companies working together with each other. So the ones that are really willing to do it, that are talking to each other, but that's still not all of crypto or all of Web3. Relating back to the same thing with the scraping on OpenSea, there's so much data out there right now, and there's new collections. Like when we were probably first getting into NFTs, when it was first coming out, there was only like 2 or 3 collections, maybe a week, and now there's like 100 a week. So the amount of data that's come out with NFTs is ridiculous, and to expect that every single project will be interoperable with each other anytime soon is unfeasible for me to see that happening in the future. Until that conversation happens where everyone can come together, there's a set industry standard maybe for 3D models, and this is how we kind of make them. This is how we make Vox models. This is how we make this kind of model. And then everyone uses the same protocols and tries to work together as one team. It's not really going to happen, in my opinion.
Sure. How about you, Matty? What have you been seeing out there?
Just a lot of conversation on that topic, but I think the question is like, how do we start the momentum so that happens? It's sort of like, honestly, the major platforms don't really talk to each other. I don't think Decentraland and Sandbox want to talk to each other. I think they're very busy building out their own thing, and it's sort of showing that they're the market leader in what they do. But it's either that or like some of the projects that do want to make this happen do band together and start to push a standard that they work on and that they normalize, and then other people want to be part of that and push that forward as well. So anyway, I'm honestly just observing it all happen, and we're trying our best to have some sort of this into our games and applications. But on the large scale, when you want a lot of people to be part of this, you sort of do have to band together and sort of accept, all right, this is what we're going to go with. The problem is it's limiting to some initiatives, right? So maybe you've agreed upon something, but one project wants to do something else that it just doesn't work with the agreed upon standards. But from my point of view, just observing it all play out.
Yeah, and I think you're right that it takes a coalition that are willing to get stuff off the ground. I mean, we've already got dozens of projects taking our assets and starting and building applications and launching applications with them. And part of this kind of community thing is allowing the community to be a participant in that too. Like a lot of the stuff that's going on is just happening because we've made those files available and because they own it. And once you own something, then your role in the economy of that thing becomes quite different, and the incentive for you to go out and start to build value around it as a participant in the community becomes higher. And so, the kind of key tenet of ownership really plays into helping accelerate this. It is early days, and I think I've seen some really good willingness across Web3 to want to interact and to develop collaborations that cross-pollinate assets from different communities to show how this stuff works. Got a long way to go, but there's definitely a willingness to do it. AI, I think, will play a big role. I mean, we've been working quite a bit on this for the last few years and got our first, taste out there of NFTs that are intelligent, that can make other things in the metaverse. And so if we can have machines kind of be our little cyborg friends to help us build these things, that'll speed up both the creator economy for those who want to get into it but maybe don't have the skills, but also standardizations, because machines can spit out these different formats that might be required for different engines or different game environments or application environments much quicker and cheaper than humans can.
I just want to ask, how far do you reckon that is from happening?
We're already, in not production, but in pre-prod in our own environments, we're making avatars, swords, cars with our AI that come, fully rigged and ready to go. So
for anyone that's watched my Twitter recently, you can tell that I'm like super obsessed about AI over the last 24 hours. I don't know why, but been going down every rabbit hole, reading all these terminologies. I'm like, holy shit, this thing's like taken off. I feel like it was at the stage when I was first getting to know NFTs. I feel like we're sort of at that, almost at the start of that inflection point where AI is just going to start taking over some processes.
It's exactly right. So one of the things that's kind of taken over in the Sandbox is, I'm sure you've seen the avatar collections, like the Snoop Dogg ones. All of those are generated by an AI kind of thing. So the artist will build each part, but actually the collection put together is an AI that puts all 10K together in a different way with all the different traits.
And it brings up a good point around AI. It's like, it's something that we used to talk about as a buzzword, but it becomes just a natural piece of technology that's embedded in a lot of great like solutions, right? I feel like Web3 kind of is following a bit that path.
Yeah, you want it to be, again, that feeling of magic, you know,
Yeah.
stop like shoving technology down people's throat and give them great experiences.
100%. We unfortunately have to wrap up, but I do want to do one quick question for everyone who's building in the space and wants to build a future Metaverse. Who's playing nice right now? Who's been surprising in how open they've been and how they want to build the Metaverse that you've seen? Go.
Wow. Who's playing nice? I have a soft spot for Decentraland because that was my first love. I like the fact that they've said, you know what, if you have an external NFT, you can bring it in and you can give it some value and wrap it across your avatar. And I like that it's a little bit open like that. They were one of the first to put out a DAO that you can use your NFTs to vote on. I sort of like their openness in experimenting like that. I feel like they're a bit slow because they are a DAO, but that's interesting. And I don't know. I feel like the large ones sort of want to keep their strength in the space by focusing on their own platforms. I think there's a lot of mid to large platforms that are okay to just sort of open up and work with anyone in the space. I can't really think of any individual names, to be honest, but honestly, anyone that we've collabed with or is open to collab with anything else to increase the value proposition overall, I think is a pretty cool partner or project.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to say the Futureverse, and if you're out there and you're doing something cool and you want to work with us, come and talk to us. We've got lots of great people that are, you know, not our teams that are building with us. Some of the ones I've seen doing some really cool stuff and being open to collaborating would be the likes of Jadu. They've got some of the best AR experiences out there, and they've incorporated a lot of different collections in what they're doing. Crypto Walkers is another one that I've seen being really active about reaching out and working with other projects. So there's certainly plenty of people out there that are wanting to kind of band together and make this thing work.
I guess this kind of leads into what we are kind of formally doing in the Sandbox at the moment. Over the last 3 months, we've kind of started to develop these country teams, and what we're developing now is the Australiaverse in the Sandbox. So we're looking for any IP really that wants to, has an Australian name, like anything like from Vegemite to, I guess, all the way from Vegemite all the way till, I guess, the AFL, anything like that. Anyone who wants to partner with the Sandbox, they kind of want to bring people into the Web3 space because it is for everyone. And I think when it comes into Web3 in general, most of the big, medium to big companies are very willing to help you out. They want to get you in the space because we all kind of know the only way this is going to work is if we get more people on.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
When's Sandbox going to be public?
I know that, but I can't say.
No, it's all love, to be honest. I've been watching it for 4 years grow. I really want to use it. We got like 500 land in the Metakey, just dying to build something and like onboard our community, right?
All I can say is you're going to be very happy next year.
Awesome. Thanks so much, guys, for joining me, and thanks everyone for tuning in.